Now I'd like to introduce our next presenter, and she is here with us live, but her presentation is recorded, and the reason for that is because there's a huge time difference. It was all pre-recorded, but she's here with us, and after the presentation you'll have chance to talk to her and ask some questions. So I encourage you to use the chat and type in all of your questions there during her presentation.
Hello, everyone. Good morning where you are, probably, and where I am, it's good afternoon. I've been thinking about talking to this topic for quite a while as a new manager or mid level manager, so I thought it'll be a great build stuff, will be a great place to talk about what I've learned so far in my career as a tech leader. My name is Maryam Umar. I am head of quality at a fintech called Thought Machine in London. My journey has been quite interesting in my career. I worked in the field of quality assurance for the past 13, almost 14 years now. I started my career as a hands on tester, testing a small financial platform. I then moved into a company where I tested shortcodes on mobiles, which are the billing software used for billing customers about these small shortcodes, which forms and so on. By that time, I had realized that doing manual testing at the time was quite tedious, and I really wanted to try and increase my impact as a tester. So I really quickly moved into test automation, and this was actually in my first role. After my second role, I actually just realized that what I enjoy doing most is working on products where I myself am a customer. So I moved into a company called OpenTable, which is a really big organization which produces a software to allow you to do restaurant bookings. And after that, I went into the travel industry because I really enjoyed traveling myself, and I was testing things which I was using myself. But at that time, I got really annoyed by the leaders and managers I had. I would say they were managers and not leaders, and we can talk about that in a bit. So I made a conscious choice to actually move into a leadership role. Um, a lot of people in the tech industry actually love writing code, and that's why they come into it. But as they progress in their careers, most organizations make this classic mistake of making their best programmers tech lead managers or tech leads. And then they start complaining about, oh, I don't want to be in this role, and I'm not getting to do what I really enjoy doing the most. And that's another classic problem which we see in the software, in the computer science industry, computing industry. For me, I actually chose management mainly because the managers I had didn't really know how to work with software testers per se. The objectives that were set for me were not great. When I used to talk about progression, all I was told was that you need to write more code, whereas as a software tester, that is not really what I was looking for. I wanted to make sure that I was increasing my impact and actually providing value to our customers as a whole. And I don't blame the manager I had at the time, but more so, I think they were not guided by their leadership, which is why I say there's a difference between management and leading. Um, Managers really come in terms of, okay, these are your objectives, these are your tasks, but with leadership, the goal really should be about minimizing your personal impact and maximizing your team's impact. So when I switched into management about 3-4 years ago now, I think, what I came in with was a very limited idea of what management looked like. in terms of basically the things I was craving for as in managee, and I wasn't getting. So those were the only things I was thinking of when I started doing team management. So today in this talk, I really want to emphasize that tech leadership or managing engineering teams is extremely intense. Management as a whole is an intense role in any industry, but I think in the tech industry it's even harder. But honestly, when you see the rewards from your team, the acknowledgement from your peers, it makes it really fruitful, and it makes you really humbled at the end of the day. I also think that the role for middle management is even harder than execs or top level management, because unfortunately the times we're in now, a lot of people are losing jobs and it's mid-level management that gets scrapped. But in my experience, I feel these are the people that if you don't have them, you really can't implement the products that you want to. What I've found in the past few years is that leading is a very different job to management. It's not about learning the latest in technology or sending your teams on conferences and so on. When you become a leader, you have to understand that you are stepping away from the limelight. You must not take credit. And what I've seen about successful leaders are, one, people I genuinely wanted to work with throughout, and I wanted to be a part of their teams, not because of the products they were working on, but more because of their style of managing and leading. And they really infused a level of encouragement and confidence in myself. What I've also learned is that as a leader, you're not implementing anything yourself. You're implementing everything through the people you have and not the technology they're using. It's more about how you manage them, their expectations, and how you actually cultivate their strengths so that your team becomes really strong. The second thing is that you want to also think about how your impact is measured in the company. Your teams may be implementing a lot of things. Sometimes the role I'm in, it's a quality assurance role, and the problem with quality assurance roles is that sometimes exec teams start seeing that, okay, we're finding far too many issues as part of signing off our products, and that in itself can be taken two ways. A lot of people may see it as, this team is actually finding more issues and our software is really buggy and they're not fixing it, or they're missing scenarios, which is why we're seeing incidents. Whereas the way I view it, especially in the world of quality assurance, is that the impact of my team has increased because the role of quality assurance is to highlight the problems and not fix them, and highlight them early and during our development cycles. So really the value of my team and our group is measured by how much of an impact we have, and not via the technology we're using or the tools we're using, etc. That's more within our team rather than in the organization. There are a lot of things I didn't know in year one of my management. A lot of people also think about it as, oh, it's a promotion. I think I wouldn't think it's a promotion. It's more of a parallel role, and where it sounds very glorious to have the word manager or principal or something in your title. Again, it becomes really secondary, and I feel like you really need to understand if you can manage and lead people. It's something which is probably an innate personality trait which some people have, and not all engineers who are amazing are managers or can be good managers. Some things I really didn't know when I started management is that time will not be on my side, mainly because there were a lot of things that I had to do all the time, and I still have to do all of the time. And I'll talk a little bit about my experiences as we go forward. Um, I felt that I started off really looking at building people because that's the experience I did not have as a managee, and building teams. But then I also had to make sure that I was making time for creating strategic directions for my wider teams and make sure that I'm always available for my team. And then also, you want to make time for learning and understanding the products you're working for. And in the end, you must always make time for yourself. And that's something we managers and leaders get really bad at over time. So today I want to share some stories about my journey so far, and I'm really hoping that some of the tools and examples I'll share will help you not make the same mistakes that I did over time. The first thing nobody told me, and I probably didn't see it, which is why I didn't realize I had to do this: always, always, always document everything when it comes to people management. I have a few stories to share when it comes to this. Unfortunately, as leaders, sometimes you don't get the people you want to manage in terms of personalities. I am quite empathetic as a person. So when someone comes to me with their problem, I genuinely want to try and find a solution for it. I remember once I had this person in my team who wanted flexible hours for working. Now, I'm not against flexible hours at all. I'm more about the output that the person produces. But this person was asking for flexibility to the extent that they would be missing team ceremonies. They were trying to help their child to prepare for some exams, which I completely understand. When you create diverse teams, different people have different roles they play in their households, and you want to try and ensure that you are providing them an environment where they don't need to worry about what's happening in their homes, and so that they can concentrate fully at work. So the flexibility they were asking for was that they wanted to work from 7 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. Which is fine in theory, but if you think about it, they would be missing probably planning sessions and retrospectives for their teams. And I actually sat down with them and I said to them, look, if you're missing planning sessions, it's your responsibility to work with your tech lead and ensure you understand the stories and you provide feedback in a written form. Then I also said to them, for retrospectives, I expect you to provide your input in advance so it's taken on board. But of course, that team was losing a tester's perspective in the retrospective. Anyway, so they started. And at the time, we had a new Scrum Master for that team. And the Scrum Master came to me a couple of weeks later and said, X, Y, and Z is never in the meeting. I was like, yeah, I know, because they're doing flexible hours, and this is what we've agreed, and this is what we wrote. What I forgot to do was copy the Scrum Master into that email I sent to this person. They said, yeah, but I'm usually in really early, which I know they were, like 8:30 a.m. And they said, this person's hardly in. I was like, okay. And then they said, our stories are getting delayed for the sprint. We're not signing off the features in time. So I confronted this person. I said, look, we agreed to do this. Can you show me proof? My style of management is not to do micromanagement. My style is, and a lot of people would probably not agree, is to trust people by default in my teams and only question their output once there is a reason to question it. And this is the data I had. And I said to them that, look, this is what is happening. So I think you need to change your hours from 9 to 4. It's like, no, that's not possible. I have to pick up my children and it's not possible at all. And at that point, I actually needed to say to them, look, it's just not your responsibility. It's your partner's responsibility as well, which is a very difficult conversation to have from someone who is producing outputs fairly well. But since they changed their timings, it didn't work. And I told them that whilst I'm empathetic to your situation, I also know you have a responsibility towards your team and the business. And that was something very hard for me to understand and balance, which is something one of my leaders taught me at the time. So this person actually eventually decided to leave the company because the work schedule they wanted to work on was not agreeing with their team, which is okay. I mean, there was no ill will. But then another example of where I say documentation is really important is when people start underperforming. I remember we used to do quarterly reviews, and this person I had in the team, whereas they were good technically, their soft skills were faltering. And we had an internal L&D system, a learning and development system, and we had some soft skills programs in there. And this was a principal engineer. And something I expected of my personal engineers was that they would actually try and mentor other people in our team. And nobody in the team wanted to work with them. They said this person doesn't know how to communicate, and they're really blunt and difficult to work with. And I think as you progress in your career, your communication skills have to improve drastically. You need to become a person who people want to work with and want to learn from, which was not the case for this person. So I continuously asked them to do the soft skills course. I tried to assign it to them in our L&D system. But what I didn't do was not follow up in writing with what we agreed. And come end of year, when I marked them as inconsistent, which meant that they don't get a pay rise, they got really upset. And they said, "Oh, you never said this to me," which I did. And they were really upset. And this refused to talk to me following our end of year review conversation. And that led to an HR event where they raised a grievance that my manager did not tell me, and it was not nice. It went on for a good 7 months, and the mistake I made was not follow up in an email and ask them to agree in writing that these are the skills they need to develop in order to progress to the next level. So always document what you agree with, even if it's in a handwritten note that you have, and follow up in writing when it comes to 6-month or annual reviews, which is really useful. And also something when it comes to annual reviews is that don't be softy in your approach. Be blunt. You have to tell people, this is the data I have, this is what people are saying about you, I'm not happy. Even though you're extremely friendly with the person, because I feel when you are friendly with people, sometimes they take advantage of it, and then they're unfair to you, and it's a break of trust. And when that happens, you can't really work in the team. And some people will try and stick around. Trust doesn't matter to them, and then you have this weird energy in the team, which is not great. But some people are sensible enough, and they see that the lack of trust is actually not good for them, and then they decide to leave the company, which works best in both ways. The second mistake I did was that, because this was my own experience, I only looked at how I can promote people and what I can do to help them learn more. I personally wasn't learning a lot when I was a managee. So the first thing I did as a manager was, okay, what can I put into people's objectives to help them move to the next level? I was quite fortunate that when I did my first managerial role, we had a very good career framework written out, which actually said this is what's expected of you at this level, and in order to progress to the next level, these are the tasks we expect of you. So I would actually look at those individual tasks and ask the people to say, okay, make sure you mentor others, make sure you're producing test frameworks, really high level things. But I did not look at what I could do to provide that environment for them, which was really difficult and something I learned over time. But fortunately, I was able to promote one person, and one person I was not able to promote, mainly because their impact was there but not visible, which was another thing which really winds me up. In the world of tech, a lot of people are introverts and not extroverts. And a challenge for a leader is, how do you make an introvert's impact visible? And that was where my job came in, and not the person's job. You cannot push people to change their personalities. You really need to help them understand what they can do in terms of implementation. And that's where my role came in, that I highlighted their implementation and gave them the platform to present. I actually have a person I work with who is brilliant at the work they do and the implementation they do and their thought process, but they hate public speaking, they hate presenting, they hate people management. And I'm saying hate as a really strong word because they genuinely detest it. And it is a difficult task, but sometimes people are cornered kind of into those roles, which doesn't really work at all. So make sure you think about not progressing people only. I'm sorry about the background noise at the minute. So this is something which is very important, that you don't look into progressing them only. You need to think about other things as well as part of a leader of a team. The next thing is, the mistake I made in my first role as a manager was not creating a team vision as to what is it that we're trying to do in order to progress as a team. And when you do want to progress as a team, you want to create a vision so that they know what their purpose is in the organization. And when you create a team vision, it's very important to tie it back into the organization's vision. A challenge I found in one of the companies I worked with was that I knew I had a team vision, but the organization did not have a vision or a goal, which made it really hard for people to get buy-in. Another thing was that when you come up with a vision statement, don't create it yourself. You can think about, okay guys, you can have a session with your team where you talk about what is it that we need to achieve as a wider team, and they would say, okay, more test automation or whatever, and you just need to nudge them to think bigger. You want to work with the team to create this vision, because if you just do it as yourself, then again people will say, oh, we're being dictated to follow a motto rather than working together, which is what you want to do. The togetherness of a team is what makes a team successful. And then when you have a team vision, you can actually add items from that vision statement to people's individual objectives, because then they will feel that they're contributing to a wider goal rather than just to their individual teams, which is kind of what happens when you have multiple agile teams in growing organizations. The next thing is, when you've created a vision, how do you take everybody on it? The implementation of the vision is even harder than actually creating the vision statement, and this is something I find quite challenging at the minute, because when you have a vision, visions usually have things which are more strategic and tactical rather than more around what the client wants at the minute. And when you're trying to do this, transparency is extremely important. When you're part of mid-level management, you must always take back to your team what you're learning. The more transparent you are, the easier it is for your team to understand why we are prioritizing things over other items that they think are more useful, because it affects their work day to day. This is something I am very challenged with at the minute, because my teams are really struggling with releases, and we're having a lot of patch releases at the minute, which increases their context switching, which in turn affects the quality of the product. So my role then becomes that, okay, we need to think about what process we can implement which makes the patch releases lightweight, which makes their context switching low. But they come back and say, oh, why can't we just reduce the patch releases? Why do we always have to do them whilst we're doing another release as well? Which is where I come in and tell them this is what the client conversations are, which is not what everybody really shares sometimes at the vision level, but I feel that it's very important to tell them what the transparency level is for us as an organization, because I feel the more transparent you are, most people generally stay, but some people will actually say, no, this does not agree with what my personal plan is for the next year, so that is why I'm going to leave, which is also okay. Another thing I've learned more recently is that to implement the vision, you should try and use the MOST framework. The MOST framework talks about using a mission, objective, strategies, and then tactics, which is really useful in terms of how you want to implement your vision. Your vision or your mission statement is basically what you want to do as a team. And for my team, it's mostly about improving the quality in terms of our engineering practices, deliverables, processes, and our communications. And in order to implement your mission, you want to set objectives. And our objectives could really be about I want to try and deliver on the mission. So things are, okay, I want to improve processes. Process improvement is an objective. But then what strategy could we implement for process improvement? That could be we need to improve the processes for, say, how we do code reviews, how we want to implement tactics for doing code reviews. You want to create a code review guideline. You want to create some tooling so that the linter is always showing if there are any issues there. You want to make sure that when you're doing code reviews, you have automation in place to check if there are tests being added, if there's coverage being introduced, and so on. And these strategies and tactics can actually become people's objectives, which makes it really nice. If you think about it, it's very similar to the OKR style, which is used for people management, which is objective key results. But I felt that creating the MOST framework actually created a lot of transparency for people, not only in my team, but across the wider organization as well. And I found it really useful in terms of visualizing what we want to achieve. Achieving it is a separate story. What I did then was that actually created strategies and tactics as part of a Kanban board for my team, and we set objectives for us in terms of quarters, and then it works really well like that. So this is what we wanted to do, and it's actually helped us visualize not only internally, but when we've had clients ask us about, okay, what is your strategy for improving quality of the product long term, you can actually share it as well, and you can remove the low level tactics, and you can talk about objectives in terms of test automation, processes, and so on, which worked really well. Other things, how do you build a team when you actually go into a leadership role? And this is something which is very hard, and you actually learn over time and by making mistakes. I think the biggest thing as a leader is you have to allow yourself to make mistakes, but also have mentors who guide you when you're making mistakes, because you can't really afford a lot of issues when it comes to this. You want to build the right thing. When you're building a team, you want to encourage them that you're building the right product, and you want to focus on the business success. You want to balance what you're building over how you're building it. Those are technical details which you can go into when you're building the thing right, which is very important as well. As a leader, you don't want to make all the decisions. You want to enable your team to do the decision making, because you want to try and delegate more, which is something I struggled with a lot initially, that I wasn't great at delegating, not because I wanted to do everything myself, but more because I wanted to encourage my team to focus on more of the day-to-day and their own objectives, and I didn't want to make them more busy than they were already. But then I felt that when I was doing that, they felt like they didn't have the power to drive more change and successful change. So I became more of a sounding board for them rather than guiding them into making the decisions. Sometimes if they were overwhelmed or they were doing too much context switching, my team would actually go away and define a process and said, look, I've seen this problem, this is what I've written out for the process, can you please review it and see the feasibility of implementing it? Which is great, because they're on the ground, they're seeing the problem, and I can actually just become the person who encourages them to implement it, because you want to elevate the people in your team rather than elevate yourself. And the last thing, which is really important, is how do you build the right organization? What I've learned is you shouldn't hire people who all have amazing technical capabilities. You want to have people who are good at debates, who are good at bringing varying opinions. The thing which challenges me the most is when you talk to people about creating diverse teams, they're just limited to thinking about the gender of the teams. For me, diversity is more about the backgrounds people have worked in, the type of education they have, the types of products they worked in, because all of that really helps us understand different opinions and different ways of using our products. Because especially in a quality assurance team, you want to make sure that people are thinking about how they are implementing various things and what they're doing. And the last thing is you want to make sure that you're creating independent, self-organized, cross-functional teams. And really that's important because you want to create a team which is thrives on collaboration, and it really looks forward in collaborating with other teams and other parts of the organization. Something I really struggled with as a tech manager was prioritization. When you become a manager, you have just far too many things to do: reviews, probation reviews, interviews, managing up, managing down, staying aware of everything that's going on, learning yourself, learning about the product yourself, finding the time to do kind of spot level checks on your team. And some things become urgent and some things become important. This is Eisenhower's prioritization matrix, which has really helped me. I actually got a really big chart in my on my desk, and I actually put post-its of different things. So for example, something which I needed to do immediately was make sure that a test report was created and produced for the release in time. But something we needed to do was to ensure that we had time to automate this test report. So we needed to schedule that in and make sure it was aligned with in terms of when we were balancing it, when we were producing features as well as doing strategic work. Some things that I could delegate was, okay, we need to write a Confluence page of how you're creating a postman collection, for example. I did not have to do that. I could delegate that to someone else in my team. And then things which are not important and not urgent, do it later. Matrix, which is the bottom left, are really things which end up being delegated, is what I've learned so far. So I would really encourage all new managers to really look into using this matrix, and it really helps you. If you have too many things which need to be done immediately, then I feel that's when you need to sit down with your manager and work through what are the things you can deprioritize and work through it with them, which helps you be more successful. This is, I think, something which has helped me become really moderately successful. As a manager, I feel sometimes you want to be seen as the supreme power which is invincible and so on, but I found that when you share your own vulnerabilities with your team, that is when the true essence of team comes in. I personally struggled a lot last year, and I actually presented at Build Stuff my journey about mental health. And that mainly came in because I started taking on too much as a leader. I really wanted to be available for my team all the time, which meant I was answering messages left, right, and center, even when I was on holiday. I wanted to make sure that I was suggesting articles and other things that I was reading about to help nurture them and learn them and help them move forward. I took a lot of pressure about, okay, I don't know all the latest tooling that's available for testers and what are the drawbacks for them. So I was trying to find a lot of articles and talks and experiences of people using them. But what happened was that as I was taking on a lot of this pressure, I started failing mentally, and I felt like I was not giving any time to my team or to myself. And I actually crashed personally. But I realized that when I shared this vulnerability with my team, the energy in the team just changed drastically. Their language became more from, we are here to help you and we're here to make sure that you're able to provide an impact, which was really humbling for me to see. Because instead of me saying to them, I want to make sure that your impact is visible and you are actually feeling like you're making a difference in the organization, it turned the other way, which is not the intention, but it was just really nice to see and humbling from my team's perspective. And the last thing I feel in order to make a really successful team is to introduce psychological safety. And I know in the tech world it becomes really hard to implement this because you have varying characters in teams. Emily Weber has this psychological team safety manual which she's published. And I ran this exercise as part of our team huddle in the very beginning because a lot of us were new to the organization. So we actually spent some time where we drew post-its for each one of this. And I felt like it really enabled us, one, to understand, okay, what times we work in, what times we're most efficient in, how people like to receive feedback. Some people don't like to be pulled out in the team channel. Some people like to have multiple coffee breaks, so I started doing their one-to-ones over coffees. Or some people like to work in the morning, so then I did not schedule any team related stuff in the afternoons. And I knew that if I left them messages towards the end of the day, they'll just action it early morning, which was fine. But the item in the bottom right was the one which has the most impact. I learned so much about my team. I learned that there were people who were really shy, and these were the, I would say, the court jesters of the team. There were people who were really into physical fitness, like it was extremely important for them to be able to go to the gym at lunch, because that's how they felt that they were producing really good work. So I always said to them, make sure you keep your lunch hour free or keep it blocked. And I would make sure I wouldn't book anything with them over that time. I shared my own personal anxieties with my team. For some people, their families were really important. For some people, pets were very important. For some people, they actually struggled at a personal level in terms of confidence and feeling really lonely. And I felt that when the team felt safe in sharing things like this, the energy in our team just changed drastically. There was a lot of banter. There was a lot of, oh, don't worry, I've got your back, I have more time this sprint, do you want me to help you? Or, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know how to program and Go, can you really help me, or try and find time? And everybody has their own way of teaching, and some people were really good at educating and helping others learn, and some people were very good at making jokes. I've actually found making comments about sometimes you want to pull people up and say, look, this is what I expected of you and you've not done it, guys, what's going on? And when I said that, it was okay, because we all spoke about, okay, I'm not going to micromanage them, but when I do call them out, it'll be for a genuine reason. Sometimes they also tell me of saying, you're introducing too many processes, and we can't keep up with it, can we please sit down and review it? Which was fine. It's just we've been able to tell each other off and pull each other up when we're not producing work the way we should, which was great. And I feel that what has really enabled my team to pull together during releases, during incidents, and so on. And we're really helping each other as a group. We're actually also really encouraging each other to take holiday, and we see each other struggling, and I've told people to put their laptops away, and so on and so forth. And there are these small things which really matter and really help you bring a team together when it comes to building really strong teams. So in the end, I'd just like to say that when it comes to managing teams, coming together is a beginning. When you're hiring people from different backgrounds, everybody takes time in warming up. And it's your responsibility as a manager and as a leader to provide them the time and the space to do it. But then once we are together, it means that we're progressing forward. But when we start working together, when you start wanting to help each other improve the output and hide our flaws as a team and really understand how I can help others learn in my team and the varying levels of people, that's when your team becomes really successful. I hope you've managed to pick up some things from my experiences, and I really hope some of the tools I've shared will help you in the long run. And I hope all of you are really successful in whatever way you manage teams and lead in your organizations. Thank you.
You can hear me now. Thank you, Maryam, for such a nice presentation. It was really interesting, and I have to be honest, it was one of the few presentations that I understand in this conference, so I very enjoyed it. It was great hearing your ideas, and we have many questions, but we only have time to answer to one question, and it comes from Almantas, who is asking. He says sometimes managers assign to lead activity X, and sometimes after some time they realize that the person is really not fit for reasons XYZ. So the question to you is, how do you say to a person that they're fit for the activity as a manager?
So I think there are two ways of looking at this. One could be that you want to try and push someone to learn something new, which is why you've given them a task like that. Or so say someone who's not very technical and you've asked them to go away and find a technical solution and implement a framework for one part of your product. Another reason could be because you think that they have the capability, they're just procrastinating. I think if you know that this person's a procrastinator, have it in them, I would get very blunt with them and say, look, I've given you this task because I feel you have the capability, you can succeed in it. This is the data I have so far, and I want your help in it. I think if you phrase it in a manner that you are seeking help from them rather than commanding them or dictating them to do a task, it really changes their outlook. But if you still feel, if on the other case where you think the person is not capable and they just don't have the capability to learn that piece of work, then you can just say, it's okay, I can see that you're finding it challenging. What else do you think you can pick up, and put the ball in their court? Because you want to show that you trust in them to actually want to progress forward. There are also people, though, in your teams where I find that they're okay with being okay. But the problem with people like that is that as you add more people in the team or people learn new technologies, they start going from average to inconsistent because the median of the team changes. And that's the picture you need to show to them, because really understand some people don't want to push themselves, and that's also okay. But personally, I want people who are enthused and really excited about the work we do. What is also important is that you should be careful about looking at, are they just going through a wave of slumps? Because it happens. We're all human nature. If you look at current times, it's really hard to motivate your working from home. I'm finding it hard. And when I find it hard, I actually tell my team, guys, I'm really struggling today. Please help me. And, it's just showing, I think it's a part of showing your vulnerability as I talk about it, because at the end of the day, we're all human. And sometimes my team actually said to me, it's because you're not taking lunch breaks. And I didn't realize that myself, or I was seeing that someone was just not getting out of their room during this time. And it's like, this is why you're not feeling motivated at all, which is why you're unable to do the tasks and so on. But it's really hard to balance the business versus personal ask, I think.
Yeah, I hope we can see you next year, maybe in Lithuania. That would be amazing.
Fingers crossed. I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you
so much. Thank you, everyone.